Joining us on the WBGO Journal is a performer who has one of those magical voices that can touch you so deeply when he sings. It's singer-songwriter and saxophonist Curtis Stigers. Curtis, great to see you.
Great to see you as well. Thank you for the very kind introduction.
So I know you just got back from Europe, maybe a little bit jet lagged, but we appreciate you spending some time with us here. When we first met, you came into the WBGO studios many years ago for an interview with Gary Walker, our daybreak host, the wonderful Gary Walker. And I told you back then that I knew the words to all of your songs. And you said, I guess you're a big sap. And I said, yeah, I am. But I have loved your singing from the very first time that I heard your voice. And seeing you live is also a special treat. And coming up on Sunday, October 15th, I will be in the audience at the Loft City Winery in New York City to watch you perform. Now, this is going to be an intimate setting, right, Curtis?
Yeah, I mean that I've been touring with either a quartet or a quintet for years and years. But since COVID, I have found a renewed love in just playing my guitar and singing my songs. So I will be playing in New York with just a piano player and myself. I'll be playing my guitar and I'll be playing sax, and we'll kind of go back to some of the songs that I don't necessarily do with a jazz group, and then we'll kick into the songs that I do with a jazz group. So it's for me, it's a really nice opportunity to sort of do a survey of my career, my 32 years in the record business, and get to play a little bit of the strummy stuff that I like, combined with the swingy or jazzy stuff.
This 2022 album, This Life, is really a celebration of your more than 3 decades of your musical exploration, evolution, and growth. So I want to talk about this wonderful song that you've always had, I Wonder Why, because it's something you've done many different versions of. It was your big hit in 1991 with that album that just took the music world by storm, sold 1.5 million copies. Have you ever wondered why that song has connected with so many that now is a part of This Life, your new album, with a different whole adaptation?
Well, I mean, I think I'm lucky. I think somehow Glenn Ballard and he was my co-writer, we hit on something that an idea that is kind of universal, that I wonder why we keep going through these arguments and the bickering and the disagreements, and we still stay together. And the first line of the song tips it off. The first line is "Love is a hunger," and I think sometimes you just can't walk away from it. And I mean, I've known people that have used this song as a wedding song, and it's a song about what eventually was a breakup, but I suppose there's enough hope in it, and enough, like I said, universal understanding of being in that state of disharmony and still managing to stay together, that it sort of it makes sense for some people. I really love this song because I wrote it. I mean, there are lots of people who have had hits that have to continue to do those hits, and maybe they don't love them, that they didn't write them. Whereas this is my baby. It was about something that I was going through or had gone through when I wrote it. And as my life has evolved, I got married after that. I got divorced 19 years later. Horrible thing to get divorced, but being divorced wasn't so bad, and I found love again. And it's funny how this song just keeps coming back around and meaning something new, whilst still being the same song, the same melody, the same lyrics. But once a song gets out there, it becomes everybody else's. They can take it into their heart or into their life and compare it to the things that are in their lives. The same thing has happened to me with this song. I have kind of become a punter on the outside, a listener on the outside, and I've come to it again and thought, oh, that's what this is about. Interesting.
And as soon as you hear "Love is a Hunger," that voice of Curtis Stigers, it's just something that will stay with you. And he has this soul inside him that very few artists do. I also wanted to give people an idea of a little bit more about you, because you're a unique artist. You've sung an Emmy-nominated TV theme song we'll talk about, recorded a track for one of the biggest selling pop albums of all time. You've released 9 critically acclaimed award-winning jazz albums. You've been in movies. You've come to know Seth MacFarlane, and you've had roles in the Ted movies, which are so much fun. And then you've recorded 13 studio albums and a live album singing Sinatra songs with the world-famous Danish Radio Big Band. We'll talk about some of your other influences during this interview as well. But I would imagine this life brought back so many wonderful experiences about your career, especially the ones that you've already mentioned.
Yeah, looking back at these songs on record was a lot of fun. It was pretty easy, to be honest, because we have been developing these new arrangements of these songs for the last 20 years on the road. Since I started making jazz records and touring with a jazz trio or quartet behind me, we have been figuring out ways to reinterpret the songs that people know me for, like I Wonder Why, or You're All That Matters to Me, Never Saw a Miracle, and even What's So Funny About Peace, Love, and Understanding, which I recorded for the Bodyguard soundtrack back in '92, and that of course sold over 45 million copies. So we've been looking for these and creating these new arrangements for a long time, and recreating them and trying again and putting them away for a while and bringing them back. And so it was really nice to finally get those versions on record. And then there were some that just, maybe weren't hits. There's a song called Keep Me From the Cold that was from my second album that I was sure would have a chance on the radio. And it didn't take at that point. Pop in 1995, pop music had sort of fallen off of pop radio, and it was basically a lot of grunge and cool stuff that I loved, but they weren't playing my stuff. So I got a chance to revisit that and give it another shot. It was really nice, and it was also requested by a lot of my fans. They'd come up when I was signing CDs after and say, we love this new version, you should record that. I say, well, I don't do things over. I've always really fought against, sort of copying myself and doing the same thing again. But after 30 years, and that's what this was, it was a 30-year anniversary album, I thought, all right, I can look back just for a minute.
And I can vouch, Keep Me From the Cold is a beautiful song that you will enjoy on this album. So you talked about, and we've talked about, that when you broke out in 1991, you had huge success with your first album. But after a chat with the late great saxophonist Michael Brecker, he told you some things that really changed the trajectory of your career. Do you want to tell us about what he said to you?
Yeah, I met Michael back in 1993 in Washington during the Clinton inaugural week, his first inauguration. We were part of this saxophone choir that included Jerry Mulligan and David Sanborn and Grover Washington Jr. And I mean, it was amazing. It was just this, and there I was. I've always considered myself a singer who carries a saxophone around, but especially in company of people like that. But because I had a hit right then, they asked me to do it. And what was I going to do? Turn it down? So I got to know all of those guys a bit, and Michael very well. We became good friends, and used to have dinner every now and then. And he was my hero as a kid, and he was my hero and my friend as an adult. In 2000, my third pop record, and it was more of a singer-songwriter record than the first couple of records, had come out on Columbia and just didn't do anything, kind of stiffed. And I had been playing a lot more jazz again. I'd come back to it because I grew up playing jazz as well as rock and roll and pop and everything else. But I studied jazz in school, but at that point I realized what I really wanted to do was to make jazz records. I thought that my pop labels would have wanted me to make both, but they just wanted me to make pop records. So I got to this point where I was terrified. I wasn't making any money. I wasn't touring with the pop thing, and I hadn't really jumped into the jazz world. So I called Michael one day and I said, hey, this is something I'm thinking about releasing an album on Concord Jazz label, and what do you think? Can I make a living doing this? Is this crazy? And he said, you've got to do it. This is what your heart is telling you. And, he basically said, jump in, the water's great. And he was right. I made that jump, and I realized that my income was going to come almost entirely from touring from then on, because, jazz records, the wonderful listeners of WBGO buy jazz records, but not too many more people do. It's not a hugely financially rewarding thing to try to sell jazz records. What we do as jazz musicians is we go out there and we play the music, and that's what I always wanted to do anyway. So I made this decision to do that in the year 2000, and it paid off. I built a career playing at jazz festivals and theaters all over Europe, and the occasional festival in the States. But for the most part, a lot of my career has been in Europe. But Michael was right. The water was great, and it just got better and better. And eventually I started, winning awards for albums of mine, and I've made a living. And then the record business crumbled. So I seemed like a genius. I had chosen not to stay in that pop world, and try to sell records. And now nobody sells records except for, I'm sure Beyonce sells a few records, but the sort of mid-level artists, it's, you sell like jazz musicians have always sold their records. You sell them at gigs, and you fill seats. You put butts in seats, as we say, and that's how we make a living.
You could say that Curtis Stigers has also had some luck, but luck also comes with talent. And the theme for the amazing Emmy award-winning TV show Sons of Anarchy is one that people love to hear you perform. And now with This Life, there's a whole new version of this Sons of Anarchy theme that people have come to be synonymous with Curtis Stigers.
Yeah, the recording that plays at the beginning of Sons of Anarchy, every time you watch it, it rocks. My friend Bob Thiel Jr., who is the son of Bob Thiel, the great jazz producer who produced all those great Coltrane records. Bob Thiel Jr. was the music supervisor, and he made that music. He sent me the track and said, write some lyrics for this. I need it for the show. And eventually I ended up being the singer on it. And it rocks. It gave me a chance to kind of go back to my blues and rock roots. But and when it came time to record it again for this new album, and it's the title track of the new album, This Life, we needed a version that we could play that sounded like us. And so we made it a little swampier and a little bit more, I don't know, it's more atmospheric. There are no super loud electric guitars playing blues rock, but I think we managed to keep it ominous and foreboding and cool and dark, and yet not we don't quite hit the decibel meter as hard as we did on that first recording of it.
How was that when that was such a fantastic show that most people are familiar with? I know you got to know members of the cast and whatnot. Being a part of something that special, what was that like for you?
It was really, really fun. It was really a surprise, first of all. It just came out of nowhere. Bob just said, write some lyrics. And the next thing you know, I'm hearing myself on a TV show. And I thought, well, okay, that's cool. I'm on a TV show. And then it just got bigger and bigger, and we won some ASCAP awards. We were nominated for an Emmy Award for writing the song, so we got to go to the Emmys. And actually, speaking of Seth MacFarlane, I got to ride in Seth MacFarlane's limo to the Emmys. That was pretty fun. So it was really amazing. We did a little sort of a mini tour with Katie Segal, who is one of the stars of the show, and who sang some of the soundtrack stuff. And she's a wonderful singer, and really fun. I mean, it was kind of like stepping out of my life and just sort of stepping into someone else's life for a little bit. And that was nice. I didn't have to run the show. I could just sort of show up and sing a song or two, and then go back and have a beer with Boone Jr. from the cast. It was a pretty fun experience.
We've talked a lot on the WBGO Journal of how the COVID pandemic has led to creativity for so many artists. And it really has for you too. You began a weekly internet live stream show called Songs from My Kitchen, which continues to be a huge success. And I've heard you say, really has brought new fans to Curtis Stigers and his music. So how has that been for you?
I loved it. It kept me going. And it also rejuvenated my I don't know, my curiosity about what I could do as a musician. Because I was sitting here all by myself, well, myself and my dogs, my 4 dogs. Actually, it started as 3 dogs, and my wife was up late one night and bid on another dog. So we ended up with an extra dog in the mix. And because I was alone, I couldn't really play a lot of the jazz stuff that I play on the road. I don't play jazz piano. I don't play jazz guitar. I play singer-songwriter guitar. So I started playing songs that I hadn't played in years of my own. I started learning other people's songs, and I got a lot better on the guitar. And eventually I decided to start doing a live stream. It took me a while. I didn't do it at the beginning of the pandemic because I saw and heard so many bad live stream shows. The technology was not quite there yet. And so I'd tune into these things where you could just barely hear the person, and it was kind of uncomfortable. And it was like, someone that I really loved, and I'd have to turn it off. And so I thought, well, I'm not going to do that. I do not want to look and sound bad. I might as well just not sound and look at all. But I met a person through a friend. I met a producer, Kelly Lynn Knott, in Minneapolis of all places, and I've only met her in person once, and it was years out, actually months and months after we had been doing the show. But she really helped me get the technology down, and I was able to figure out how to use my good studio mics, and that was fun. I learned a whole new trick. I learned how to, be my own engineer at home. I also started making videos with the help of my dogs and with the help of an iPhone and iMovie. I made a lot of little films of me playing songs. Actually, I even did some duets with Larry Goldings, the great pianist and organist, one of the greatest musicians in the world, in my opinion. I would play something and send it to him. I'd film myself playing something, send it to him. He would film himself playing to that track, and then he'd send it back to me, and I'd edited them together and made these pandemic duets that were I think they're some of my favorite things that I've ever done. So it was really good for me. And what it did also is it led me to these duo gigs, these sort of intimate acoustic gigs that I'm doing coming up soon in New York and all over the country. I haven't played in the United States all that much lately, and now I'm really making a concerted effort to play those kind of shows in the US because I can do them, more cheaply, basically. I don't have to fly so many people around. I don't have to put so many people in hotels. And it's really, really fun. And no one gets in my way. It's just me. And the piano player comes up a little bit later, and if he gets in my way, I send him home. No, I don't really. I'm just kidding. Anyway.
Before we talk about your wonderful wife, Jody, I got to know the names of the 4 dogs.
Well, we've got the youngest is Stanley. He'll be 3. Stanley's a Bernie Doodle. And he's the biggest. He's the youngest, and he's just this huge Marmaduke of a boy. Very sweet, but he eats trees. It's kind of a give and take. Then the oldest, or the second to oldest, is Louis. Louis is a Portuguese water dog, lovely boy. And then there's Hank, who's named after Hank Mobley, the great jazz saxophonist. And Hank is a Yorkie poo, and he weighs about 5 pounds. Little guy. I just say, you're not a Yorkie, you're a poodle, dude. He looks like a poodle. And then our elder stateswoman is Boo. She's 14. She's only got a few teeth in the back left. And she is a Morkie. She weighs 2.5 pounds, and she runs riot over this place. They are terrified of her little toothless self.
I love it. I knew one was going to be named after a jazzers. I just knew that. So
yeah, absolutely.
And you're joining us from your home in Boise, Idaho.
Right here in the kitchen. Yes.
Yeah. And now your wife, I've had the pleasure of interviewing Jody
Yeah.
Stigers and Jody Peterson Stigers, and she has, and that was for WBGO, of course, because what she's doing is amazing. She's the executive director of the Interfaith Sanctuary Homeless Shelter in Boise, and you have played and you have contributed to that cause. But talk about your wife and the shelter and what it's meant to you and the couple.
Yeah, she is amazing, Jody. She, throughout COVID, she was a hero. I have my favorite photo of her is with a blue mask on, taking someone's temperature out in the courtyard behind the shelter, and she just looks like Superwoman. She when I met Jody, we were actually both married to other people. We eventually, got together after, well after our divorces happened, as they do. But Jody and I met each other as fundraisers. We raised funds for a local a disc jockey, a local radio host here on public radio, who had been diagnosed with cancer, and he had a year to live. And so we got together, put a bunch of musicians together, and created this night that raised funds for him, and it really worked. And so I said, hey, we should do. I have this idea for a Christmas show. I used to appear on Glenn Burtnick's Xmas Extravaganza at the Bottom Line in New York City, and it was just a big variety show. And she said, yes, let's do it this Christmas, but it's not a Christmas show. I'm a Jew. And I said, fantastic. It's the holiday show. And so it's the Extreme Holiday Extravaganza. And we have done it for 18 years. We've raised way over $1 million, millions of dollars over those 18 years. Along the way, Jody became very interested in what the shelter did. At that point, she was in marketing for nonprofits. By 6 or 7 years ago, she had become the executive director, and she has expanded it. She has added mental health programming. She's added sobriety programs. She's added, she's amazing. She really is cool. And I get to help her by singing. I mean, that's really what I do. She just says, Curtis, sing then. And I say, yes, dear. How loud? That's, and she does all the rest. And she's been through it. I mean, during COVID, she took one shelter and split it into 3 shelters so she could create enough room so everyone could distance. Because if you're homeless, how do you socially distance from people when you have COVID? So she had to create a COVID hotel and a hotel for families. And anyway, it's an amazing thing, and it's a labor of love for me, both because I really love the work that they do, and I love the fact that anyone can go to this shelter. It is a low barrier shelter, which means it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter who you love, it doesn't matter where you're from, it doesn't matter who you pray to, none of that matters. If you need a place to sleep, if you need a meal, you're welcome. And that's great. The other big shelter in town is very much pointed toward people who are willing to say that they're not gay and they're Christians. And I don't get that. People are people. Anyway, you asked me a short question and I gave you a long answer. She's also really, really good looking, and I like that. There's nothing wrong with that. She's a good looking angel, is what I say.
There you go. And it is, once again, the Interfaith Sanctuary Homeless Shelter in Boise, Idaho. And Jody Peterson Stigers is the executive director of that. You might not know that Curtis Stigers has met a king, but he wasn't king at the time. He was just Prince. He was Prince Charles. You want to tell us that story?
My buddy Chuck. Yeah. My buddy King Chuck. It was just a funny old thing. I was asked by a big party planner in London. I mean, I have a much higher profile overseas, particularly in the UK and Germany. And so I was asked to sing with the Ronnie Scott's big band, Ronnie Scott's being the legendary jazz club in London that I play a couple of weeks a year. I was asked to play with their big band for a gala for the Prince's Trust. And I did. Why wouldn't I? It was a riot. It was really fun. I mean, they first asked me if I'd do it for free, and I said, well, how about just enough to pay for me to get over there? And so and I made sure that the band got paid well. And it was a lot of fun. And I was really, I was surprised. I grew up with an image of Prince Charles as being kind of, sort of stiff and kind of nerdy, and the big ears, and you just long neck and kind of goofy looking. And when I met him, he was the coolest cat. He was just like, "Hello, how are you? It's so great to have you on your saxophone. I just love your saxophone play." It was just like he was such a good guy. There are plenty of anti-royalists who will be breathing down my neck on Twitter about this, but I get it. But I found him charming, and then now he's king. So I know a king. I'm not sure if I don't think he's taking my calls though. I'm pretty sure he's gonna let it ring he's gonna let it go to voicemail when I call.
You've opened for some of the most iconic artists that we've ever known: Elton John, Prince, Eric Clapton, James Brown, Joe Cocker, Rod Stewart, Bonnie Raitt. Anyone in particular that you would say that was just a really special night for me?
Well, many, many years ago, just right after my first record came out overseas, so almost a year after my first record came out, I was lucky enough to play 3 nights at Wembley Stadium in London, which at that time was holding about 88,000 people. And I got to play Wembley with Bonnie Raitt, Elton John, and Eric Clapton. And all 3 of them were heroes of mine. And that day, or those 3 days, actually, it was 3 nights at Wembley Stadium, were 3 of the most memorable times. Elton has always been very kind to me. He's always, for a superstar and someone that I grew up idolizing Elton John. I had not 1, but 3 Elton John posters on my wall. That was my first hero. Goodbye Yellow Brick Road was the first album I ever bought. And then right after that, I bought a Chick Corea record just to keep the WBGO people on track here. But he was lovely. Bonnie, I have gotten to play with many times since then. Anytime she comes to town, she invites me up to play saxophone and sing a song with her, and that's just heaven. Prince was extraordinary. I never met him. I was afraid to meet him. I just watched him. Sort of stand stock still and just sort of pose. He was a great hero of mine. I just didn't want to spoil the mystery. I sort of like him being a god as opposed to a guy, and I'm fine with that. So I've been really lucky. I got to play with Nancy Wilson once. I got to open for Nancy Wilson and meet Nancy Wilson, the great jazz singer. Playing with Randy Brecker, the few times I got to play with him was just a dream come true. I got to play a show in San Sebastian, Spain, where I finally met Chick Corea about a year before he passed, so not that long ago at all. And he was just lovely. He took photos with me, and he was just, it couldn't have been more dreamy as a guy. He was just such a good human being. So I've been lucky. I'm a music fan. I'm a fanboy to the millionth degree, and I get to meet some of my heroes. It's really cool.
That is. We have about 5 minutes left. So I wanted to find out, is there a song that you're working on, or just the thought process that you have when it comes to writing, that you wanted to write this song for a while, but you're still working on it? Is there one out there?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm always trying to tap into what I'm going through. And there's obviously, there's something that's got to come out of the pandemic and out of, spending that time at home and sort of reassessing who I am as an artist and as a person. I'm also, I'm married to someone who, because of her job and just because of her personality, there's a lot of craziness going on. And life just seems nuts all the time. And so I've always had this idea for a song called Learning to Love the Crazy. And I have learned to love it. I learned it early on, but I always thought that was a good title. The hardest part for me with songs is starting them, finding a title to go. Once I get going, then boom, I'm off to the races. And I love finishing songs, of course, but it's always finding that first idea. It helps to have somebody in the room saying, "Oh, well, what about this?" And then bam, it'll just light up my brain. Larry Goldings was always good with that. He would send me an entire song musically. would be all the music, and then he would just sing one line in one place in the song. And almost every time it turned into a song that was called that title. So the first one that I remember that we did that way was a song called "How Could a Man Take Such a Fall?" And Larry played this whole song. He sent me the demo, and every time the end of the verse came along and said, "How could a man take such a fall?" Do do. And I thought, oh my God, this is about me. It's perfect. I just had my daughter had just been born. I had just jumped off the ledge into the jazz world from the pop world, and yet I was incredibly happy. So I wrote a song based on that. They used to know me at the track, but I quit the ponies and I ain't been back. Now I'm watching little babies crawl. How could a man take such a fall? And Larry and I were incredibly excited and honored and thrilled when years later, the great Bob Dorough covered the song on one of his records. I just, to have been covered by a hero like Bob Dorough, it was just the coolest thing. So anyway, that was another long answer to a short question. You're welcome, Doug.
I love it, Curtis. And Curtis Stigers will be performing at the Loft at the City Winery in New York City on October 15th. Make sure you check out his 2022 album, This Life. And if you've never watched Sons of Anarchy, you got to check that out, because not only are you going to love the theme, but you're going to love the show as well. And it was a beautiful way to start that show with the sounds of Curtis Stigers. No matter, Curtis, you could sing the phone book and I'll be fine on the 15th when we hear you. So we really appreciate your time, continued success, and thanks for joining us on the WBGO Journal.
Thank you, sir. It was a great pleasure to talk with you.